as per the title, today I'll be talking about integrated programming, and it's something that we've been very passionate about for over 20 years. And you'll see by some of the information that I share with you today that there are just all of these inextricable links between safety, health, and the micro components of health. If we drill down to heart health, diabetes risk, mental health, that they are so linked in, but yet the majority of our program has been often done in silos, and we work throughout Australia, New Zealand, the United States, and also other regions of the world, and we've also found that that silo approach is more amplified in some parts of the world as well. Over here in Australia, I think we're some of the best placed to actually get that nice integration. But interestingly enough, I think one of the things that holds us back is that often all of us health practitioners have our own domain, and we tend to focus really heavily down that pathway. So I hope I sort of prompt your thinking a little bit today, and that it really helps you from a strategic planning perspective, and gives you some nice ideas to integrate within your own programs. So Sarah, just the next slide, thanks. And I apologise everybody that I said to Sarah, I've sent Sarah into a panic because I had a PowerPoint failure this morning, which I have no idea what has caused it. So, but we will make it work. So a little bit about us, which I've largely already mentioned about the breadth of our service provision, and the three main areas that we work in that you can see down the bottom right of the slide, that we go, and we always have gone across safety and injury prevention, health and wellness, and that mental health and high performance space. And on the left hand side, you'll see with those figures around program engagement is that we have always had this very simple mantra that if you can't engage people, you can't change them. It's just that horse before the cart before the horse scenario that you've got to get sorted. That we have to firstly work on engagement strategies, get that sorted, and then start working at the changes that we're after in whichever one of those domains. But the one thing I will tell you is that the buy-in is greater when we do link them, because what it does is loads up a whole bunch of really good reasons so that people can see some of the the health benefits of maintaining sort of safety and injury prevention behaviours. So the next one, thanks Sarah. So folks, what I'll do here, and this is probably one of those engagement things, and we're going to organise Sarah will put up a poll in a minute where we have found unequivocally that you've got to give people good reasons to change, and you can do that by cleverly using your scientific data. And this is just one little example that so often all of us have had ergonomic programs that have given us a series of stretches to do, preventative stretches, and it might give us a little bit of information as to why. But one of the things that we've found via a motion analysis tool that we have is that by quantifying it, the chances of behavioural change increase dramatically, because all of a sudden, people can relate to it. They potentially feel, in this case, that they're feeling pain and discomfort in that upper neck area, and it can provide them with those good reasons to shift some certain behaviours. So Sarah, we might just pop the poll up, and I'll just explain to people. So I'll just get you to just choose one of the categories where you think. So with the perfect posture on the left-hand side, that you can see that there's 34 kilos of pressure going through that neck area. With the poor posture on the right side, if you can just choose which option, in which category you think the correct answer will fall. as to how much pressure is on the neck and shoulder region with that poor posture.
Greg, I think everybody is trying to sit up really straight and vote. All right, we've got about 70% voted now, so just wait a couple more seconds. All right, I'm going to share that now.
Oh, there we go. Gee, we did this with a Middle Eastern African audience the other day, and you guys are ahead of them in the sense that the correct answer, and no one chose it the other day, but 3 people have chosen it here, that it's actually 148 kilos. So that the pressure increases dramatically as you go across. So we'll flick on, Sarah, to the next slide. And sorry, I will just remove that. And this starts to give you some of the reason for it, that basically the head is so heavy. Think about a watermelon, and that's pretty much what you've got. So for every centimetre that moves forward from your perfect spinal alignment, that you've got that compounding pressure effect. And you guys would all recognise, for all of us that sit in front of a screen, or for drivers in front of vehicles or machinery, that it's such a primary area where we feel discomfort. So the next one, Sarah. And I'll just stop briefly on this one, but this is another, and you'll notice the catch cry on the slide heading, this idea of good reasons to change, that behaviourally, people need 5 to 6 good reasons for every barrier that they've got to actually, it really is that what's in it for me. Like, why should I actually engage in that behaviour to change? So you can start to see the rationale that if we can start to educate people on the pressure, and then we actually tell them why, like what is the actual impact on their bodies, that all of a sudden we're building up those good reasons and moving them closer to behavioural action. So that's the rationale with it. And next one. And just to give you like a little bit of an idea of how maybe, and there's a couple of case studies coming up on the next few slides, but to give you an idea of how integrated programming can look and how it works, is that you can see that performance dashboard on the left-hand side of the screen. And remember what I said at the very start, that it's all got to start with engagement. So if you can't engage them, you can't change them. So we're looking at strategies, firstly, to get that population voluntarily engaged. And I stress voluntary. The work that we do in the US, it's a very incentive-driven market, where it's just become, so despite all the behavioural research, incentives have created a momentum of their own, and sometimes it's to the detriment of true sustainable behaviour change. Because I would contend, and it's certainly been my experience over 25 years, that as long as you get the messaging right, that people inherently want to be healthier. They don't want to be mentally ill, they don't want to be injured. So no matter what the work environment, and I speak across mining, construction, transport, and all manner of office areas, that when really drilled down, every single person will put their hand up in the affirmative that they would like to be healthier in at least some small way. So you can see there that on that dashboard that you get them engaged, and then if you actually get the prescription right for the person, that they will actually implement actions. And then it's the measured change, and then the risk range reduction. And again, typically, so that I'm talking health in that instance, and you can see that with the injury reductions there as well, that taking that same behavioural approach in the injury space can bring across some really serious injury reductions as well. And the piece on the right hand side is something that can really, I suppose, mount your case for engagement. And and I will end up showing you when the next slide comes up what an issue engagement is. But you can see that that particular one there is that what typically happens in many health programs is that to the left-hand side of the screen, we end up engaging just the action and maintenance people. And you can see those in the right-hand side of the screen down the bottom there. So they're the people that are typically ready to take action. You don't need too many good reasons to get them into that action phase. But the difficult ones to get to are those ones up that top end of the scale, the pre-contemplators, the contemplators, and the people who are considering action in preparation mode. But naturally, what you can see with the cost benefit and the ROI on the left-hand side of that graph is that it increases dramatically. And it makes sense because the further you engage past that healthy population and you start to engage into the unhealthy group, the paybacks multiply dramatically. So that's the next one. Thanks, Sarah. And we will send this one out to you, so I won't spend a great deal of time on it. But the table on the right-hand side is it was a really significant survey by the consultant group Willis Towers Watson, and it went out to around about 1,600 organisations globally. It is heavily skewed with North American data, probably because of the maturity of the health and wellness system over there, and because of the link into insurance. But what you can see there, the figure down the right-hand side is basically engagement. And I stress that it's once a year participation, which behaviourally, in our experience, will not work. And it's summarised in the top in those little yellow boxes that was the once a year engagement in those particular services across those 1,600 organisations. And you can see the obvious issue there is that we're not getting, in general, the industry is not getting that genuine voluntary engagement aspect right, which, then you can struggle to go to the next step. So, yeah, next slide. So in terms of what works, and this is hopefully a little bit of a take-home planning tool for you, is that if I had to summarise our 25 to 30 years in this whole behavioural health space, that those graphs on the left-hand side, what it's basically saying is that you can see that spike, the darker spike, and what happens there is that when we get a significant engagement point, let's just say it's a workshop like this, the science tells us that within 48 hours, you'll lose 66% of the information, which is pretty frightening. By the time you get to 30 to 40 days, the message is practically out of mind, unless you get another spike. So another reinforcer, another piece of compelling information, a smallish toolbox talk, some coaching, however it looks, but it will sustain the message. And you can see by that, the darker trend line with those spikes, that essentially that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to actually build that engagement and hence the sustainability of whatever health behaviour, injury risk behaviour that you are trying to impact there. So that's the critical piece. And in the process, with the frequency, getting that frequency of contact, we're trying to progress people behaviourally, as you can see with the pre-contemplator, through contemplation, preparation, and into that space where we want them in the action and maintenance aspect of it. So yeah, that's the piece that I hope you take home. And when I was referring to the 5 to 6 good reasons for every barrier, that is to move those people through those behavioural stages within that. So just the next one, thanks, Sarah. And just a real life case study from the rail industry over in Western Australia. And there were roughly about 1,000 people in this group, and it was an excellent example of integrated programming. We had such a range of individuals within this. We had some highly obese train drivers where, you know, their physical capacity was so impaired that often people had to be helped into the train cabin, that they weren't physically able enough to climb in to the cabin. So that gives you the extent of some of the extremes there. And so when you talk about integrated programming, the risk for these guys with fatigue and the injury risk, health risk, all combined in was a pretty dynamic and interesting mix. So it's a program that we really enjoyed our involvement with it, because this was actually an executive dashboard data that you're actually looking at, where they were looking at their injury reductions over time. And the one on the far right, these SPADs, so signals passed at danger. So we were concurrently looking at that whole energy and fatigue aspect to it as well, those concentration levels that are obviously so critical to safety. So some nice decreases in those as well. And then on the top of the graphic, and I know it's quite a busy graphic, that you can actually see the health improvements. So it was a nice rounded case study in the sense of the impact on fatigue, the positive impact on injury risk, and the positive impact on health outcomes. And the next one, Sarah. And yeah, we'll jump straight on, because and again, just really briefly on this one with automotive industry, this is one of the US programs that's in action, and the point with what I wanted to relate this one to was your longitudinal planning. So that I think so often, you know, both in safety and in health, we've often done very short campaign-based programs, and they are okay, but what I'd really encourage you to do is try to link them together so they have continuity over time. Because, you know, behavioural change is a journey where you are bringing people through those stages, and once you get them to action, that you are trying to maintain it, like with that last level. So the sustainability aspect to it is key. So the message with this one is that the bottom group were the initial pilot group that was roughly 2,000 people, and you can see that that second column there, the 90% of the people implementing actions, and 64% having a measured improvement in a health risk factor, and then 40% jumping an entire risk range change, that being going from high blood pressure to low blood pressure, or whatever the parameter is that we're testing. But the point is there, then when you look at the total population, that little bit over 11,000, that you'll notice how their results are really, really good, but they're lagging. So it shows you that argument for continuity, that you keep that sustainability aspect to it. And just the next one, Sarah. So, folks, I'll end up just really whipping through a couple of these ones, but what I'd love to do is just another one of the polls, just to get a feel for what you guys think are the most important health issues that you are confronting at your specific workplaces. And you can see the list there, and I've tried to keep them in quite broad categories, but yeah, some organisations might tick the whole lot of them. Others might have a real issue in one particular space, but would love you to just choose exactly which ones are impacting heavily.
Just a reminder that you can choose more than one. I hope everyone's still sitting up straight. All right, we're nearly there. We've got about 65%, so I'll just give it a couple more seconds.
And to put this in perspective as they pop up on the screen, folks, that so there we go. So yeah, really, really interesting with the mental health there at 75%, and yeah, 20%, 15, 35 for movement, 20% in sleep. I'll show you some really interesting data in a second coming up on that note. And then the ergonomic injury risk, yes. So a couple of COVID-related factors here, just on those figures there, that noticing that people have put 75% at mental health. A figure that we knew last year via Beyond Blue, and it was really consistent across all of the research and information organisations, was that basically we're all aware of the 20% annual figure of people that with a diagnosed anxiety or depression. What they looked at was extrapolating that over a lifetime, and the figure comes back to close to 1 in 2 that will have a diagnosed anxiety or depression. And they stressed diagnosed because obviously a lot of people go through short-term periods of sadness, short-term periods of struggle. So, you know, that's a pretty compelling figure, that 1 in 2 of us will have something over a lifetime. Further, 54% do not seek treatment. And you can see the obvious issue with this. This data here is 2020 data from a PwC report, and you can see on the left-hand side that, and it is US data, but it is absolutely reflective of what is going on in the rest of the world. That the cost of a healthy person, then all of a sudden, you know, it shows you the difference that if it's mental illness, the cost sort of goes close to trebling, and then you double it and a bit more when you add a chronic illness with mental illness. So there's this real compounding effect. And then something that we've known for a long, long time is that when you start layering health risks together, that, you know, the impact on the individual and certainly the impact on cost and productivity and risk, all of a sudden escalates dramatically, which is what you're seeing on the right-hand side there with the 14,000. So I think it's a really stark reminder of, you know, data-driven with how these things are linked. And the only other one I'll just comment on is what was pointed out ergonomically, because certainly we've found that with all of the work from home, that it has created a whole bunch of issues that, maybe the advice that I would give too is that be proactive with it, because sometimes these things take, or as many of you will know in this industry, that these things can take a while to seed and to exhibit. So the more proactive you are with it, certainly the better. So yeah, the next one. Thanks, Sarah. And again, a nice little example, and there's a bit to follow here. So I will just talk you through it. That it was from the construction industry, and they were doing an integrated program. They had very good engagement in the program, as you can see in the top bracket of bullet points, that 80% of the total group were engaged every single month voluntarily in the program, taking in the information, actively, you know, working to reduce risk. What you found was that the non-engaged group, so just that 20%, accounted for 63% of the total injuries. So essentially, the people engaged in the program were 6.6 times less likely to be injured. But one of the most interesting facts that came out of this was that last one, that of the 37% of the injuries that came from the bigger group, so the actual engaged group, every person that was injured also was rated high risk for a health issue. So it really backs up the PwC thing in an isolated case study that that you had these comorbidities with cholesterol, blood pressure, directly impacting and being correlated with injury risk. So I hope that's kind of interesting for you as we all move to get better at some of these things. The next slide there, Sarah. So again, breaking down, research again is really, really consistent with these things, that if we look at the effect with obesity, 2 times the rate of injury, 5 times the cost of treatment, and 10 times longer to return to work. And the next one, Sarah. And stress and mental health. And it was the reason I took the poll there, because I wanted to try to hopefully focus on the things that matter the most there. That you can see there that high, again, it correlates with the case study that I just mentioned, that high health risk, 60% more likely to also report high stress. And interestingly, when you back it into safety again, that the error rates with accidents are really significant. And the next one, Sarah. So, sleep. This is the last poll, folks, and I thank you very much for your participation with these. But Sarah will put it up, and I'm just really, really interested to see basically how many hours of which category you fall into with it, and then I'll give you some of the latest science on it. And as that poll's going, I will keep talking about it. Like the slide that's there currently, that the lack of sleep correlates with a 4 times greater likelihood of depression. And the overarching comment that I would make as a practitioner is that when I first started in workplace health, as I said, 25 years plus ago, if you asked me what I thought were the most critical health factors contributing to potential chronic disease, I probably would have had movement and nutrition bracketed in that sort of 1-2 position, and I probably would have had sleep at number 3. What I will tell you now is unequivocally I have sleep at number 1. And there's been a whole host of research, and in particular there was some Nobel Prize winning research in 2017 that opened up a whole new wave of research that was looking into these multiple factors that affect all body systems. So having a look at where people sit, and I would say, this is really reflective of what we would normally see with it. To not keep you waiting, I will give you the magical figure based on the current research. And the thing that I find really ironical about this, it is the old wives' tale. We all got told 8 hours sleep, and the research keeps coming back to this 8-hour mark being that really, really optimal phase. The one that I would also really caution you on is that I cannot tell you how many people I've come across say, I function well on limited sleep. In the research, it clearly shows that the number of people that is truly reflective for is so minimal, less than 1%. It's a micro, like a 0.1 of 1%. That is true of them. So seeing those figures there, it means that a lot of us are not getting the sleep that we need. So we'll flick on to the next one there, Sarah, and I'll whip through some of these, but there'll be things that you can relate to. So even if you look at this one of relating it into our whole interaction, relationships, concentration, ability to see things clearly. That most of us would relate to this one, that when sleep deprived, that our emotions are over amplified. And what the little complex diagram is showing is basically that with sleep deprivation, there is a separation between the amygdala, which is our emotional response, or involved in our emotional response pathway, and the prefrontal cortex, which is our sensible part of our brain that's putting rationale behind it. And we end up with this separation, disconnect that transpires into this over amplification of the emotional reactivity. And the next one, Sarah. This one I found particularly scary, as I have a genetic predisposition to a cancer risk because of an inherited gene. So, you know, it's really interesting, like even on a personal level, where I mentioned that aspect of needing 5 to 6 good reasons for every barrier, that, you know, this was probably one of the pieces of research that I thought, you know what, I have to prioritize sleep really, really highly. We all have probably experienced that prolonged periods of sleep deprivation that have resulted in us getting ill. So we sort of always knew there was that immune system link, but it's absolutely unequivocal, and here's one at the extreme end. And the next one, Sarah. And any of you who have travelled internationally have probably experienced this, and a lot can probably also relate to it, you know, just locally, even without travel, that often when our sleep is severely disrupted, one of the things that they've found scientifically is that these 2 critical hormones that control our appetite and how full we feel are severely affected, and it often results in these sugar cravings and us, you know, basically eating more than we need. And the next one, Sarah. And again, this was also linked to that 2017 Nobel Prize winning research that I was talking about, that so they basically found these links that when we get into our restorative period of our sleep, that our glymphatic system, which is basically the equivalent of our lymphatic system in the body, that releases this fluid that basically does a cleaning job throughout the brain, taking away these amyloid proteins that often build up in chunks. And it's the buildup of these amyloid proteins that there's been a growing body of evidence linking to our Alzheimer's and dementia. So, you know, they're very, very heavily, you know, promoting good sleep hygiene as an excellent preventative measure in this space as well. And the next one, Sarah. And might need to give that one another click, Sarah, because these will come up. So just to sum some of the sleep piece together, and the reason that I've given you so much on sleep is that it's such an overarching impact on health and safety, on mental health, and on general health status. And it's probably in line with the comment that I mentioned to you, that if I had to pick, you know, what aspect of health is that most critical at the minute, this is what it is. And so you can see that linked to depression. I'll get to the graph on the right-hand side shortly, but just the next one, Sarah. Immune system, backing onto the cancer risk, and then the heart health, that 5 hours or less sleep per night doubles your risk of heart disease, and then the fatigue and cognitive function. And I know that you know, Vic Roads and other transport government functions throughout Australia have often done some really good work on this area of fatigue and equating it to something that's relatable with blood alcohol levels and things like that. But there is that obvious, and you saw the previous statistic that I gave about the error rates associated, from a mental illness perspective. So again, all intertwined. And so what that graph is on the right-hand side there is hours of sleep versus likelihood of developing disease. And you can see that it's kind of aligned, that on the left-hand side, that if you're down around the 4 to 5 to the 6 hours, that risk starts to decrease. And then the optimal zone, you put a circle around that 8 hours. And then if you are sleeping too much, that starts to go up again. That's the bit where the research is unclear. On the left-hand side of the graph, there's this growing body of research. The research is still flimsy on why too much sleep becomes a dramatic issue. And the next one, Sarah. So again, I'll whip through a couple of these links here, but again, looking at the power of movement, and I know movement came up really, really highly in that poll question there as well. But yeah, the reason I put this up, this is just a working example of a compelling reason to change. So those 5 to 6 for every barrier that I was talking about, that something like that is something that is likely to prompt a behavioural change. So getting your hands on really, really good content and material. And the next one, Sarah. And again, so let's just back this one into, if we were trying to provide people with those good reasons to do movement breaks from their desk, knowing that I've come across so many organisations where they might have had a fantastic pop-up ergonomic stretch reminder, but often they lack the compelling facts, the behavioural drivers to get people to actually do it. Whereas here, showing that drop-off in energy rate versus getting those movement breaks where you can see the spikes go up, where you might take a large movement break or a small movement break, and all of a sudden you can maintain a good level of energy. And the next one, Sarah. And again, just linking exercise to depression and anxiety and mental health, that this study is also reflective of so many others, that really the general message in amongst this is that exercise is pretty much as effective as medication. And then when you combine the both groups, that it goes even higher. But I think that's the most compelling thing about almost this natural antidepressant effect of exercise that most of us are aware of. Because if I asked most of you, how many of you would feel more relaxed after exercise? If it's an audience-based scenario, I generally get, 100% of people putting their hand up with that. And the reason I've got that diagram on the right-hand side there is just to give you an idea of the brain chemical effect with exercise. And in general, what it does is decrease dopamine, which is linked to anxiety. It's part of the adrenaline pathway. And it increases serotonin, which is at really, really low levels linked to depression. So exercise has this double brain reward. So that's why you end up with, I went to a WorkSafe presentation a number of years ago by the then CEO of Beyond Blue. She started her presentation and ended her presentation with the same comment. She said, if you do nothing else for your mental health, please just move. The research is compelling. And the next one. And hydration, again, putting the reasons around it, but interestingly that, most research still says that about 75% of us, get around dehydrated. We often push it to a level because our bodies are so resilient and our brains are so resilient that we can often just push on and on and on. And it's often when, if you get to a level where you feel thirsty, you're already dehydrated. So it's about being a little bit proactive, and there's been very good, education around this, and hopefully, the message is getting through nice and strongly. And the next one there, that a brief one. So again, this whole integrated programming approach that we might be, we might have a campaign running on nutrition, but linking it into all of these other benefits. And in this case, again, putting a risk of depression link in with the Mediterranean diet, and Okinawa in Japan was another example. And just as a quick takeaway with that, one of the things that we are really pushing to populations now to take away a whole bunch of the complication with nutritional advice is aim to at least have half your plate with vegetables. So it becomes a really, really simple way of getting things going in the right direction. And the next one. So, and we'll flick on to the next one there, Sarah, with mental health. So I did want to focus on this one because I thought it might be a really, really useful one for, again, from a strategic planning point of view. And I think it makes complete sense when you consider what came up in your survey results, where so many people had listed, I think it was 75% that had listed mental health as being one of the key priorities there. And these are the figures that I gave you before, that, close to 1 in 2, that 45% of the population will experience a diagnosed depression or anxiety in their lifetime. And the one about the 54% of people with a diagnosed mental illness who do not access treatment. Now, there could be multiple layers of reasons why people don't access treatment, all the way from literally the accessibility of it and the communication around it, to stigma, to also in some cases possibly a sense of helplessness, where people get to a level where their dysfunction doesn't allow them to be proactive enough to take action. So the message out of it is that I strongly believe that, like we did with back injuries 20 years ago, that we need to do with mental health now is get ahead of the curve and really focus on that prevention aspect, while concurrently improving, the effectiveness of treatment protocols. So, and the little example that I give you at the bottom there was just one example of a branding and a program that we actually utilised in the mining areas of up in the Pilbara region of Western Australia, and it was probably quite innovative at the time, and I still think, and it probably still is really, that back then we were asked to do a road show, and it was to be titled Mental Health. And we said, can we change the branding of it? Because we would really like to send the message that every single person can be healthier mentally, that there's things that everyone can be doing every day to build their mental fitness, to build their resilience levels. And we came up with this concept of headquarters boot camp for your brain, and promoted it around that way. So, yeah, so the general message out of that is that get your prevention things in action, and with the top right hand, get your frequency of messaging, so that things like Are You OK Day, that has been a tremendous campaign, so that gets sustainability over a period of time. And the next one. Thanks, Sarah. And just really kind of, I'll really briefly with this one, but I showed you a little bit of the brain chemistry, but when you talk about kind of integrated programming, we still have some involvement in executive health checks, and one of the things that we have tried to do progressively over the years is really, as you've seen through the trend of the presentation, is combining so many of these aspects and really digging further into it. And in that middle one, with this high performance pathway concept, that the idea of that is combining physical health with emotional health, mental health, and linking it into human purpose, like what really drives people. And we also then know, behavioural change-wise, that tapping into emotion, tapping into human purpose, we can actually really escalate the progress made on that the whole mental health and physical health aspect to it. And the next one, Sarah. And so just a couple more examples, and sorry, the next one again, Sarah, with looking at again, strategic planning wise, I would really encourage you to think about, and a lot of you probably realise intuitively and know intuitively that there is an absolute link between sort of things like hydration, brain glucose, the effect on fatigue, the ensuing effect on posture, whether it be driving, whether it be at your desk, etc. So, one of the things that we're finding proactive organisations are doing is really linking ergonomics in with some of those critical lifestyle factors, so that it becomes more than just stopping and starting with how does my posture look at the workstation, so that people actually understand the contributory effects of some of these other health factors. And the next one, and little case study from Lockheed Martin, where and again, it's the thing that was neat about this was that I think in the safety world, what we've done really, really well is there's been, particularly in the last few years, a real refinement into critical risks and really honing in on what matters most. And most progressive organisations are trying to do that. But I also think too, within things like your manual handling training, that you really need to be looking into doing the exact same at an isolated program level. What matters most? So really looking at load pressures, task technique, relating it strongly to physical capability, linking it into a total life focus, so that you're actually getting that emotive buy-in from the individuals. And so all of that was done very, very well and with good, compelling reasons for this group, and they got some nice reductions in injury risk from that as well. And the next one there, Sarah. I'll whip through in knowing how we're going time-wise there. But just with this one here, a couple of the pieces that I would look at differently is that this particular safety program, you'll see a lot of the usual suspects in terms of what we try to include within a safety program. But some of the things that might be a little bit different with the whole state of mind aspect, and probably understanding rushing and everything, is that little bit at the bottom right-hand side. In this particular instance, we looked at propensity to take risk, so that people actually really understood their particular differences in that. And if we jump onto the next slide, Sarah, that what the idea of it was, that there was education that we were able to give to team leaders and site managers that gave them basically a little bit of the science behind risk-based decision making, how different types of brain chemical profiles will have a different appetite for risk. Again, it's something that we know intuitively, but we often have generic safety programs in it. So I think it's incredibly valuable for that education to take things to a new level and really linking it in with a different science. And Sarah, the next one there, which just reaffirms that, as I said, so I suppose I'm challenging all of us a little bit here, that generic is easy because it's uniform and we get it out there, but we all know intuitively that people are hardwired differently. So it makes sense not to bury that aspect away. And the next one, Sarah. And with this one, what I would just link it back, and I know, you know, probably most safety programs have an element of this where you've really linked it into a who are you safe for. But what I would highly encourage you to do is, in the same way that there's been so much recent commentary around purpose and what matters most to individuals and how important that is for their emotional health, mental health, general health, but tapping into that purpose, and safety was ahead of the game with it, is that it is a behavioural accelerator. It absolutely fast tracks that progression from pre-contemplation through to that action maintenance area where we want to get people. So my message out of this slide is keep reinventing how you are getting this messaging across. It does not get old. I know you have to change your campaigns a little bit, but it is so, so powerful from a behavioural change perspective if you can tap into that purpose aspect. And the next one there, Sarah, which is the thank you. And yeah, all there to, I know I motored through a fair few things, but the bit that I would sort of say with that is that with the topic being integrated programming, there really was, you know, so many different aspects to it. And I suppose the key messages that I hope that I've given you out of it is that these things are really inextricably linked, and would really encourage you to look at that within your programming with the view that it will escalate results dramatically. So I'll hand back to Sarah there.
Thank you very much, Craig. That was fantastic. I have just want to remind people, if you want to ask any questions just now, please use the Q&A panel. I have just shared a link to the webinar next week, which is on a proactive approach to mental health trends. So if you want to join that, please go to that link and sign up. And I'll also just drop a link to all the webinars that are coming up. And there you go. And so we don't have any questions as just now. I will remind everyone that this has been recorded. We'll email it out later, a page that you can share on if you like, and also some contact information for Greg's organisation. So if you have any questions, you can ask them directly if you want more information about that. So without any further questions, thank you so much for joining us, Greg, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their working week. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks all.